Hello, folks. We are on Tuesday, aren't we? So we are on Christmas Eve. Wow, that came up quick. As somebody who does quite a lot of writing and has been paid for doing it more than once, I know how precious your creations are to you as an artist, whether it be in terms of doing actual art or in doing your writing or anything like that. I know how much it means to you to have your name out there in the published field so other people can find you. A lot of people over the past few weeks have been talking to me either on Discord or in real life about Games Workshop and how they generally, their writing style and standards have gone down quite a bit, whether it be lore, whether it be rules, or whatever have you. Over the past 10 to 15 years, the quality of their writing has suddenly taken a bit of a nosedive. Now, I'm not here to complain or talk about Games Workshop always having this, absolute Pulitzer Prize winning, literary artwork running throughout their work. No. It's never been the case. Games Workshop have always been from a niche hobby, and they've always had fun with their writing, right? It's always been one of them things. What I'm saying is that the general quality of both the rules and the lore have seen a bit of a shock downturn over recent years, and I have a few reasons why that is the case. The first is the general, shall we say, direction that Games Workshop has been travelling in terms of its game trajectory, right? We've been seeing, as we've seen on this channel quite a few times, we have been seeing the tournament scene, for better or worse, becoming the main focal point of the hobby. That is what we're geared towards these days. We are geared towards, essentially, competitive play to keep things more balanced, right? Everything needs to be balanced, everything needs to be perfectly in depth towards everything else, and there are so many grey areas in the rules, but at the same time they try to eliminate them, that creates more, and it's essentially like having a limitless video game that requires patching over and over and over and over again. And in doing that, you don't really want to be giving people at your studio credit as writers. But I have another feeling here, and that is that the quality of Games Workshop's writing has gone down because one of the main reasons is that they stopped crediting their writers. And it's my central thesis of this entire video. If Games Workshop don't credit their writers, then why should they try? In my opinion, they shouldn't. You're a mercenary, you're a writer, right? If you're getting credit, if people are literally giving you credit and paying you well for your writing chops, then yes, throw everything that you can into doing the best that you can for your client. If you are treated as part of a company like Games Workshop, but you're still treated as if you're in a gig economy, and you don't even get to put your name on any of the things that you write, why would you care about what you're writing? Where is your ownership? Where is your pride? You don't have any. That's the problem, yeah? That's the problem we're seeing. So, whilst, yes, I have spoken quite a few times, look at the state of this £42.50 for a rulebook, come on, dude. But anyway, whilst I've stated quite a few times on different videos that, yes, the gamification of Warhammer 40,000 and Games Workshop games in general has seen things take a bit of a downturn. Why? Because the lore no longer really matters. Let's be honest. To Games Workshop, the lore is the lore. It's there if you want it. It's not there if you don't. The way they sell most of their models is through gaming, right? It's through people getting involved in the game, going to events, going to stores, and playing games of Warhammer 40,000. One of the key things I've noted that is not very good is the fact that they seem to not recognise who most of their gaming base is, right? It's guys like me and you, who I can almost guarantee is watching this video. We like our beer, we like our pretzels, we like our mates, and we like to roll dice and have fun blowing stuff up on the tabletop, right? We're not the kind of people who get into a van or a car and travel 2 or 3 hours to go to a very, very, very cold auditorium to play 2 to 3 games of excruciatingly long games of Warhammer 40,000 against complete strangers when one of those 3 is going to turn out to be an absolute nightmare of the highest sort. That doesn't sound like fun to us, and so we don't do it. But Games Workshop, as a company, gears its entire game towards people who do things like that and are prepared to do things like that. The competitive side of the hobby has taken over the hobby. Now, if you're going to patch your rules every couple of weeks, why would your writing team care a jot about writing balanced rules and good rules in the first place? I'm going to go on a segue here as well. I've said this before and I'll say it again. A really good wargame doesn't need to be balanced. I've said it so many times. People still misunderstand what I mean by that. It doesn't need to be balanced, dude. A really, really good wargame absolutely has no need of balance. I mean, it has to be balanced in a way that you can play the game and it literally makes sense to play the game and it has a semblance of fairness in it. Yes, fair enough. But in terms of making every single faction dumbed down to the point that they all resemble each other, that isn't balanced. That's bland. That's bland and not good, and why should we bother, right? Okay, but back to my main point. If you are going to make rules that you're going to patch and change a couple of weeks after they're written, and in certain ways, like the Space Dwarves, I said Cardron Overlords there in my head, I don't know why. Leagues of Atan. In certain situations like the Leagues of Atan, your entire codex that you just wrote as a writer is now gone, and they completely nuke those rules that you wrote, and they come up with some new ones. If I was a writer at that studio, it would be extremely demoralising. Before we even go into what they're paid, we're talking £20,000 to £25,000 a year. That is not a lot of money to live on, especially if you're in, a very, very competitive place for it in terms of living. If you're in Nottingham, you're not going to get very much for your money there. You're going to be probably house sharing with people. And you're a writer for a major gaming company. That honestly, you're in an ideal situation. Unlike video games, right? Games Workshop always has need of writers. There's not one time of the year where Games Workshop doesn't need some mook to write something. Normal video games, yeah, okay. Once the video game's been made, you're on to the next video game, but once your bit of that video game is done, you are sitting around twiddling your thumbs. I get that. That is a gig economy. I get what you're saying there. But in terms of Games Workshop, there's always something coming out, and there's always something that needs to be written. All of the time, right? You should be getting paid a lot more than you are, so please do not think that I'm having a go at you if you are a writer at Games Workshop and you're thinking that this is triggering you a little bit. No, dude, I'm not having a go at you whatsoever. What I'm saying is, I don't see why you should try, and a lot of you seem to get that too, and you don't. And I understand, and I support your decision to not bother, right? Because you're not compensated enough in terms of finances, and even if you were, nobody sees your name anyway. The other thing about this is accountability. It's accountability. We all know who Matt Ward is. Now, and I know one of the main reasons that Games Workshop said for not giving their writers credit for the games is the abuse that Matt Ward gets. And, alright, guys, even if that is the case, even if I give you that point, I'm just going to be very kind here. I'm going to give that to you. I'm going to say, okay, that's fine. I get that. That's a thing I can get behind. It is one aspect of the hobby, that you get into. Matt Ward wrote some of the. It's almost an urban legend now how bad his codexes were, right? But as a Grey Knight fan, let me tell you, my faction still is not over the hangover of what that guy did to our army. People still don't like Grey Knights because of the codex Matt Ward wrote. The Demon Hunter's Codex, right? People still have a go at me when they see my Grey Knights. It's insane how people don't let this go. Now, I have read that codex, of course. I have read the Ultramarines Codex that Matt Ward was involved in. Again, these are bonkers codexes with bonkers lore and bonkers rules. But I have a counterpoint to Games Workshop's claim of abuse, quote unquote, right? Do better. Yeah? What it took for the community to turn on Matt Ward was him not learning his lesson and releasing product after product that was worse and worse and worse, and not just egregious, but absolutely not even trying to stay within the lines of a competitive game, to stay within the lines of the lore that was already there in 40k, right? To excite people, get them involved in the game. The only thing a Matt Ward Codex forced you to do was be very confused about how your army was so powerful and how it could do certain things, right? Again, there were certain people who couldn't get enough of it, who really got off on it. And those people, we don't need in the hobby anyway, because, you know, this is a place for everybody. And if you're the kind of person who thinks a problem doesn't exist because it doesn't affect you, you're an asshole, and I don't want to be around you. So goodbye, right? But what I will say is that the amount of terrible work this guy had to produce to get that abuse, I'm not going to say it's justified, because abuse of a personage is never justified, but it's an extreme example, is what I'm saying. The Games Workshop to hold up that example and say, this is why we don't credit our writers anymore, I call bullshit. Simple as. I literally don't see that as the thing at all, right? The reason why Games Workshop don't credit their writers is very simple. They don't want to credit their writers. They don't want anybody else to have ownership of any of their rules or intellectual property, right? Now, in doing so, we have seen a slew of people leave through hook or by crook. Tragically, like Alan Blythe and all the people like him who have been taken from us. But we also have a lot of different writers going through at Games Workshop who have left over the years, who did very good jobs on codexes, legendary codexes back in the day. Your Andy Chambers, your Rick Priestley's, guys like that, who wrote for the game at a time when the game was both balanced and silly. Every single faction was built and played really differently back in the day, right? No one faction was very similar. You know, nowadays that's not the case. There are several factions that do operate in very similar ways because the game is slowly becoming this grey sludge that is risk-averse at offending anybody who may pick up the dice and placing toy soldiers one day, right? Well, back in the day, they didn't really care about that. And, what's more, writers put pride and effort into their work because we knew who they were. These writers developed entire careers and names for writing decent rules, for writing rules that made for fun games, for writing lore that excited and enthused those who picked up the lore books and army books that they were going to play with, right? They were at once rule makers and salesmen. That is a direct quote from Rick Priestley. That's what they used to be. They used to class themselves as that. They were rules makers, yes, but they were also salesmen. You should be able to pick up one of our books, flick through it, and have your mind absorbed by images of orcs running across a massive open battlefield shouting "War!" You get the skin on your wrist goes all goose pimply, and you walk over to the equivalent of the Start Collecting box set back then. That was about £35. Oh my god, right? You'd get it, and you'd get that for Christmas, or you'd get that for, you know, whatever you were doing. And you'd start your army, or you'd continue your army, right? We knew who these people were. We knew their writing styles. We knew their wants and desires. We knew how they wrote codexes. And by the way, gone are the ages where you would actually have people in 40k these days who would buy a codex because it's a codex. I know, it sounds weird, right? Let me ask you a question, dear reader. When was the last time you bought a codex that was not for an army you own, or for an army you were going to own? I'll even narrow that down even further. When was the last time you bought a codex that wasn't to do with your immediate army? Yeah, if it was years ago, or maybe it's never even happened to you, I would not be surprised if the majority of people on this video answered in a negative there, saying, yeah, I've never done that, right? Back in the day, would it surprise you to know, there were a lot of people who collected codexes. They would look forward to the next Rick Priestley release. They would look forward to the next Andy Chambers release. Because they liked their writing style. They liked how they built armies. Every single codex that came out was an event for wargamers because they could get it as a bespoke thing. Just as you would go and buy a Frank Frazetta piece of artwork to hang on your wall, you would go and buy a Games Workshop approved codex because the writers who wrote this codex knew what they were doing and you supported and enjoyed their work. Imperial armor, things like that, right? The Badab War, right? Things like that. They would always sell because you would enjoy the writing of the person writing that book, or writing that army book, or writing that campaign book. You would go and get it for the writing itself, for the rules themselves, for the art of the thing, rather than, I need this so I can take it to my local tournament so I can get a -1 to hit on any of these people within 6 inches of my unit commander, blah, 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 right? When you're greybeards, and sometimes, one lad in an email put it really well. He said, North, your channel is like a lexicon for greybeards talking to younger lads. And I guess that's what it is, because I'm the generation between greybeards and the younger ones out there, right? The younger ones being the guys in their 20s and younger who are into the hobby. Congratulations, by the way. You've chosen a very good hobby to be into. But I'm of the generation between the old greybeards who were literally the guys who were buying those codexes for Rick Priestley and Andy Chambers and guys like that, right? Gav Thorpe, all those guys, right? There were guys who were buying those codexes, and you guys, if you are younger, who are listening to this, I'm the generation in the middle. So I'm kind of the translator here. And I think we're seeing the difference in generations. A lot of us seem to look at the hobby and think, well, it's going downhill. It's not what it used to be. But I do think at this time of year, it is Christmas, right? We're getting there. And I do think we need to look back and kind of readjust our thought process, older dudes, you know? We've had this hobby for a long time. And we've been the custodians for this thing for a hell of a long time. And is it any... Well, my point is, I think it's quite natural. Is it any surprise that the hobby changes when new people come into it, of newer ages? I don't think it is, right? And I think it's okay. I think it's okay that the younger chaps who come in, who love our hobby, change it for what they want it to be eventually, right? I don't mean in terms of, injecting wokeness into the story. No. For Warhammer 40,000, there's certain things. If you don't like Grimdark, go away. Right? If you don't like Warhammer 40,000, simply go away. But if you come into Warhammer 40,000 and you're naturally a video gamer who likes things like Dark Souls or esports, competitive gaming, and you're into this for that, then the hobby will naturally change through osmosis of you being here, right? And that's the kind of change that I'm okay with, because that means the hobby is changing to suit its audience, rather than the other way around, than where we see Games Workshop trying to change the hobby to fit with modern political agendas. That's not what I'm saying. We need to get that out the hobby and keep it as far away as possible. But if young lads and lasses come into the game and they're wanting to, go to tournaments and they think that's the hobby, it's a competitive side of things are more esports now. There may be old greybeards like ourselves and guys who are a bit younger than you, greybeards like me, who still have many greybeard friends, should just stick to our own and have our own games, And we've always got the additions that came before. No one's going to take those away from us. So I think rather than us railing at these dudes, I think a good thing that we can do is say, look, if that's what you want the hobby to be, all power to you, dude. It's not my kind of thing, If you want to be into my hobby, then I'll tell you about it. But if you want modern Milsim 40k, that's fine too, because the game changes for the audience that comes into it, or it should do at least. In terms of where we are with in terms of writing, if this interests you, younger people, this is what it used to be like. You'd have guys literally going up there and buying codexes and rulebooks for the sake of buying codexes and rulebooks. And that's pretty incredible, if you ask me. That is absolutely pretty incredible. So, that is my thought on whether Games Workshop writers should even be bothered about writing these days. I don't. They're not paid enough, and they're not going to get any credit, even if they do. This is one of those situations and issues that I honestly think that Games Workshop could solve with one simple readjustment and reversal. Start crediting your writers in your rulebooks and codexes, right? And if they're getting backlash because they're not writing very good rulebooks and codexes, train them to do so, or hire people who can. You're charging enough money that we should be holding you to much higher standards than we currently are. And I, for one, am going to start doing that in the new year, if not before. Alright? Good. Anyway, I love you a long time. I will speak to you tomorrow for some more Hobby Nightmares. I know it's Christmas Day. Still not leaving you behind there, dude. I will be here with some more Hobby Nightmares. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon. Have a good one. Bye now.